Olá a todas e todos. É um grande
Hi,
prazer estar
everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today for this Talking Business International Career, How and Where to Start. It's a pleasure to have very two inspiring people with us today, Felipe Aragão and also Ariadne Bogo. I'm Jason Diet. I'm the Vice President of Global Hub, and I'm going to talk to you briefly about how this event's going to take place and a little bit about our guests today. So, and soon you're going to get into our chat, our dialogue here. Our format's going to be 15 minutes of interaction, be one-on-one with Felipe and then with Ariadne. We are broadcasting this event in two different channels, the Unintergam channel in Portuguese and also Portuguese in English at the Global Hub. Both Ariadne and Felipe are Brazilians. We could have this event in Portuguese. I'm American, but they spent a long time abroad, and um, the knowledge of English was very important to their career. So we decided to do this mix, and I'm going to take advantage of a few minutes that I have in English to uh, rest a little bit my brain. So first, I'd like to thank all Uninter schools that are partners in this series of Talking Business events. Internal collaboration is very important to us. So thank you so much for the school deans who have supported the initiatives, and also Global Hub CEO and International Operations at Uninter, Raul Binker. So let's start. Felipe, he's from Rio. He studied in Yale in the US. He lived in the Silicon Valley and he founded the Fiber, a startup that helps companies to access customer data stored in tools like Salesforce or VTAX. He can get into more technical details if you want. He did his internship at Meta, Facebook and Instagram, and worked as a computer science course called CS50, an introduction to programming course that originated in Harvard and went and spread out to Yale and other schools. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. Felipe was also accepted together with Fiber into the Y Combinator. And I might know it's a very important accelerator in Silicon Valley. And it's very hard to get in, so it's a huge achievement to get this support. And he's also a former Fundação Estudar scholarship holder. So he has an international career where and how to start are very important factors. You never start with a network. You have family, friends, but you have to work on that. And Felipe's going to talk a little bit more about that. Ariadne is someone that I know very well. She was a global ambassador. She was a Unter student. She graduated in system analysis and development at Uninter. And now she works as a backend developer at BTG Pactual, one of the main investment banks, not only in Brazil, but also in Latin America. She also not only studied system analysis and development, she also graduated in nutrition at the Federal Paraíba University, the UFPB. But there was a change in focus and all the challenges that came with that. So it's a great pleasure to have you both here with us today. I'm going to ask 5 questions to each one of you. And I'm just going to ask you to bear in mind that what is the action or critical decision that you took in terms of each question? How did you uh, maximize each opportunity? Where you didn't uh, take the best of the opportunities? What did you leave at the table? What did you learn from that? And what are the the advice that you can give to our audience today? So that's why we are here. So Felipe, welcome. Um, So feel free to ask anything that you want, any mistake that I made that I left aside from your bio. And the question that I'd like to ask you to open this conversation is, can you talk a little bit about the MIT open course that you took? You got to know this core, the CS50, this introductory um, computing course that you took. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here and be part of this event and share some of my learnings throughout my career. Well, I think you're talking about the MIT open course. That's how it's called. The MIT Open Courseware is a MIT initiative and other universities in the US. It started in the beginning of the year 2000 to have the classes from those um, most on the edge universities, and I think MIT created the most famous version of this um, initiative, the MIT Open Courseware. I think that I was on the internet. I was like 13, and I read an article at the exam magazine website talking about MIT Harvard published free classes on YouTube. I didn't know what MIT was. I knew a little bit what Harvard was. I was a pre-teenager, and looking at this article, one of the classes that I used in the exam was a computing class that they were providing at the YouTube, and that's the article that started my relationship throughout all of these years in computer science, software development. That's how I started learn how to program Python, the first language, programming language that I learned. And I've learned at the end of um, my elementary school. So I went to a technical school in Rio to have a specialty course in computing. And I started at that time to keep developing my passion for software. And then I had this opportunity to go abroad, and that you're going to talk about. But MIT Open Course were the first thing that started to me, that opened uh, this world of studying abroad, learning programming, and so on. Perfect. Now, tell me a little bit about your experience with Fundação Estudar. Fundação Estudar was maybe the institution with the most impact in my life. For those who don't know, this Fundação Estudar exists for like the past 3 decades. It was founded by three great names in Brazil to help Brazilian students who wanted to go abroad to study their undergraduate school and graduate school with financial scholarship. My relationship with Fundação Estudar was when I already knew what MIT was. I was already looking at trying to go to the US to study, and a friend of mine asked me if I want to participate of the prep program. Um, it was a pillar at the Estudar who helps students, high school students, to it's a different application than what we do in Brazil. So it will help us to apply for US university. It has to do not only your English and math test, but it tests your personality. You have recommendation letters. You have to write about who you are. It's a process that for an American student, they know that has to go through that. They have the high school help. But for Brazilians, we have no idea how to go through this process. So Fundação Estudar helped me to go through this application process and allowed me to apply for schools such as Yale, where I finally was accepted in 2015. Perfect. So You arrived at Yale, right? And something that I didn't mention at the opening, that you also participated in the Brazil Club at the University of Yale. I think you have this context because my experience of 15 years in Brazil, we have brilliant people all over the world. So we have brilliant Brazilians, very competitive, very capable people, as much as in any other country. But there are universities that happen to be in the US, but those are international universities. Could you explain a little bit about your experience with the Brazil Club in Yale? I think you wouldn't have an American club in school in Brazil. So how was that? What was the importance of this club, and what was your participation? One of the most characteristic uh, things about those top universities in the US, what make they different than Brazilian schools or top universities in other parts of the world, is that their extracurricular activities are an important part of what you do throughout your 4 years there. So at the university, as a university, there was many clubs. We decided to resurrect the Brazilian Cup. When I arrived, it was kind of uh, dying. So I was there with eight or nine brilliant Brazilians who started freshman in 2015. And since then, the Brazilian community was very dispersed for many years. We've approved very few people, few Brazilians who were living in Brazil at that time. So we decided to create this space or recreate this space so that once a week we could talk uh, about samba, speak Portuguese, relax. Uh, and it's a week that you're interacting with people that are not, um, they don't have the same background as you and they don't share your values, maybe. So this was a very important space for me. It was the beginning of very important friendships, but not only for me, but everybody who was part of it. And I still have contact with members of the Brazil Club that are now at Yale, and they are studying at Yale now. So I'm still, so I think at the Yale Club and the Brazil, you still have contact with your network, right? And I think for me, something that is, there is a huge cultural difference that is very relevant in terms of networking because people are not from the same city, the same region. So you must be used to creating this network. So what is a Y Combinator, which is a different type of network, a different type of support? And how did you get to know this? How did you apply to this network? And what is the relevance of it? Well, I found out about why when I was in high school. Actually, I remember watching videos about Paul Brand, one of the founders, one of the main characters of Silicon Valley in 2010, 2015, 11. So I had this relationship with Silicon Valley through my computer screen. So at a certain point during my course at Yale, I started starting my startup experiments. I decided that that's what was there for me when I started my own company, when I graduated. And of course, YC is the program that when you start a startup in the US, a technology startup, it's the most important program that you can have and can have access to. The Y Combinator Accelerator is a 3 months process. They had an initial selective process, like 20, 30,000 people apply with their ideas, their profiles, to try to work during 3 months in an idea, accelerate it, and raise some money at the end of their program. And through YC, I'm at more founders in my 3 months of IC. Like, I was in the US for years, but I'm throughout these 3 months, I met more founders my whole life. I I got to know these people who I related to, and it changed my life for sure. Perfect. Now, let's talk to the audience. I'm happy that many questions coming to the chat. Please carry on. You don't need to send 2 or 3 times. We are receiving it in our final block. We are going to address as many questions as we can. So keep sending your questions and comments. So final question before uh, start talking to Ariadne. You
I was supposed to switch to English on that last question, and I had to work too hard. So we're going to switch to English for this last one. And while you were at Yale, you did an internship at Meta, right? So I was curious, was that sort of your first taste of a Silicon Valley company? What was that experience like, and how did you get it?
Yeah, yes, it was. It was life-changing. So while I was in high school and going through the application process, actually one of the movies I remember watching the most to be inspired is the Social Network, the movie about Mark Zuckerberg creating Facebook at Harvard. And I was also working on my mini startup on the side, and I always found that story like fascinating. I love the director. I love that movie to this day, and I watched it a lot. And so going into internship season, quickly set the stage for people. Internships in the US, they happen during the summer, which is the middle of the year, the time in between the longest break between semesters. Going into internship season, Facebook was the only company I wanted to work at. So I remember like a friend asking me, "Well, you're not going to apply anywhere else?" I was like, "No, I'm just going to go work at Facebook." I actually did manage to secure a position to work there in the summer of 2017, and it was life changing. It was like going into Yale, like experiencing that campus for the first time was bananas, but also going to Silicon Valley and experiencing the Facebook campus for the first time was insane. Um, it was in a sense also it had some downsides. I did not expect that I would get to Facebook and dislike certain aspects of working at big tech companies. And after that summer in which I had like an amazing time in California, I actually learned, I set my mind to the fact that I learned like definitively that I did not want to go back after graduating and work at a big tech company, that I was not going to be happy working in a huge place where you're spending like 3 months to basically work on a button inside of an app that people are using. The impact is great, but at the same time, the stuff that you get to work on is usually not up to you. So that was one big lesson for me at related to working at Facebook. But it was a great summer.
Excellent. So one thing I'm going to say, just as we transition over to Ariadne in a second, is there was a question that came up like, how do you start? And I'm late mid-career, so I've been around a few more years, I think, than our guests. But you always are trying to build networks and just treat people right and take an interest in what they're doing. And I think an example of that is Felipe, right? I didn't know Felipe, and I didn't find Felipe, right? There's actually a UniInter Global Ambassador Junior from this year who is a Brazilian, who's a UniInter student, who came to the Boston area. I don't even know how he met David Malan, but he's a very famous professor at Harvard who's the head of that CS50 computer science course. And he helped me, identify someone who might be interesting. So that's an example of, I've been around for longer. I worked at Harvard for a good amount of time. I had met David Malan, but the person and the network that actually got us to Felipe to be talking to you tonight is a UniInter student who reached out not to Felipe, but to David Milan, who had a rapport and a relationship with him that then led to Felipe. And it doesn't just fall into your lap. You need to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. And then you need to try. And a lot of times you're going to get a no, or you're going to get more frequently than a no, just nothing, right? People are busy. Your problems are your problems. So I just like to point that out and say thank you. And it's relevant to a question that popped up. How do you use networks? How do you start? Don't be afraid to ask. And do be careful about how you use other people's time and how you ask. So, with that, vamos voltar para o português. A gente vai ver o Felipe
We're
na
going to
mesa.
switch back to English. You're going to see Felipe in our round table at our third block. Ariadne, it's a pleasure to have you here with us again. Welcome. And I'm going to do the same thing. You can feel free to fill out the blanks that I didn't mention in your bio. And my first question is, you were a CNPq scholarship holder. So what what motivated you to go there, and what's the importance of all that? Thank you so much for the invitation, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. And since I started university, I was very interested in integrating in the three main university pillars: um, education, research, and an extension or program. So as you said, I talked to people. I tried to know when was the application date, how did they work. I saw a professor who worked in areas that I was interested, and so I saw there. I went to these professors. There was a work that I was interested in. I tried to understand a little bit more about this process. How was the application process, selection process? I made myself available, basically. And the selection process was is normally very individual. It depends on your coordinator. Maybe you're going through an interview with just your CV, an interview. I've been through many kind of application selection process, but more specifically, I think it helps you a lot if you work in a research project, because you're going to be working with innovation, with critical thinking. It's an environment that is very good for you to develop intellectual uh, knowledge and get to know people. You can publish articles, present international congress, you improve your CV, you build more contacts, you strengthen your career. Excellent. Now I'm going to take the opportunity because I have a question here about Google Development Student Club at Uninter. So this is a network that I think that started the time that you were at Uninter. So how did it start? How relevant this experience was for you? Well, actually, I found out GDSC through the global ambassador. So thank you, Jason. And the former leader contacted me because he had only applied together with Uninter for the GDSC with Google, and he was putting together his core team. So he called me, talked to me, we aligned our expectations, what the demand would be, what's the previous knowledge expected. And with that, I got in. And that was a very, very rich experience. First of all, in terms of communication, because GDSC tries to share knowledge with students. It's one of the goals. We had to work on many lives. So learning how to deal with the audience, manage fast changing situations. And we worked in different projects. We had a partnership with a master degree student in the in the public health. She was working on a protocol for palliative treatment for elderly people, and we changed that into an app for health professionals to use as a fast tracking tool. So a couple of things. You worked at the threesome. You were at the same time were trying to move into the system development and technology, right? Something from Antonio, a question from Antonio Pedro is actually about your change your career, your working. So in his case, is law to information technology. How did you do that? My question to you is GFT, you worked at GFT Group, you was an intern there. How did you work? Because I think it was the first professional change, right? Yeah, it was the first international professional opportunity in IT. So actually, at that time, I was still studying system and analysis. I did this bootcamp at Digital Innovation One. I knew they had partnerships with other companies for internships or uh, for developers. So I finished this bootcamp, but I didn't really work. I didn't really know how things work. A few weeks later, the people from Digital Innovation One called me asking if I wanted to take place in internship selection process. And I went through the selection process, many interviews, live coding, and once I was accepted, I went through a training process. It was very good. For 3 months, I've learned a lot. And then I was assigned to a client, and I've developed there, and I'm finally hired. About these changing careers, I mean, I started in how actually I'm not working the health as a health professional, but I studied health. I would take it to my life, and in the beginning, I wanted to work with technology and health. That was especially public health, but we don't have much investment in public health here in Brazil. So as I started working with analysis and system development, I started to enjoy other areas. I love health, but I also love working as a backend developer. So there are many paths one can take. There's more than one, and those paths can be good and fulfilling.
I'm going to take full advantage of my opportunity to do both of my last two questions to you in English. So could you speak a little bit about the period where you were doing freelance work for Decifre?
Sure. So I was indicated by a friend of mine to this company. And so I started working there because of that person. And the reason why I chose to work, because I was already working at GFT, but I work as backend developer. And I wanted to develop more mainly front end and architecture as well as. So I chose to work in one more place to get this experience, which was great. I worked there for about 6 months. It was a small project. Since the beginning, we had this deal that was around 6 months to develop software in accounting. So yeah, so it was basically that. I got the opportunity to develop my career.
Great. So my last question in English is for you to just describe a little bit about your work at BTG Pactual. So this is obviously it's a multi-brasileira, right? It's a different sector, but technology is an important part certainly of banking. So could you just tell us a little bit about your current work?
Yeah, sure. So BTG is, I work as a backend developer in BTG as well as, and it ends up that when I was working at GFT, I was allocated in a client that was BTG. So I got to, before working directly for BTG, I got to live daily basis the values, the culture of the company. And BTG is a extremely cohesive company. It is, as you said before, the biggest investment bank in Latin America, which demands a lot of responsibilities from the technology area as well as, and is an environment that it needs to we need to be constantly updating, making the softwares more secure and answering very fast to problems that occur with the clients, to build products that will bring value to the company. And in this perspective, I feel like that's something that I felt great working with. So, and this is something I think it's really important when you are choosing a company and for a selection to work. For example, in BTG, you need a lot of teamwork. As I said, you need to work a lot of times under pressure. And if, for example, you're not a person that likes to work with under pressure, or that, I don't know, prefers to work more individually than a teamwork, is not a company that maybe it's good for you. So that's important for you to know what are you expecting, what is best for you professionally, and search for companies that make sense for you, that has this kind of work environment.
Perfeito. Então, agora a gente vai para a parte de mesa redonda.
Very good. Now let's go to our round table. First of all, I'd like to say that throughout, I don't know, 3 or 4 years that I know Ariadne, she was in the beginning of her journey, her transitioning journey, and I think that it's something very, very important, whether in an international career, changing your sector, you're gonna suffer. You're gonna suffer to learn. It's not easy, but you have the resilience to carry on. Of course, it's not a long time. It's easier said than done, but crisis will pass. But the amount of work is a lot. So let me group some questions from our audience that follow this line. Laura Fernanda asks, how can I take the first step to start an international career or to participate in a program abroad? Rodrigo asked, my main question is, once I have a degree in Brazil, how to start for positions abroad? Another question is, not the name of the person, it's an avatar. So what's the level of English proficiency to start an international career? I think you can have an idea of how and where I start and what is the level that I need to have to start. So let me start with Felipe, because he didn't have to ask the previous question, and Ariadne, if she wants to add something, please feel free. Being very impartial, the best resources of how to take the leap and get to know opportunities that you can have abroad. What you have today are Fundação Estudar. Basically, there's a website called Studying Abroad. Many years of the best tips, the best content of opportunities in terms of scholarship abroad, background of how Brazilians have taken this leap. Very detailed interviews. I love to watch the interviews that they had at their YouTube channel when I was working on my application. especially if you want to graduate course or postgraduate course, which is, I think, would be mainly the case here. Ariadne, I'm gonna ask the question again about language. I can be a mediator here and answer from my personal experience, but what is the level that you need to have English in terms of English proficiency? I believe that it's before people start to before people think it's a level before you think. I mean, you need to have a level of understanding. And also, communication is something that you're going to build and you're going to develop. And don't be afraid to talk, to make mistakes. But even in Portuguese, we don't speak Portuguese perfectly at 100%. Don't feel that you must be perfect all the time. I think if you can understand what's being spoken and develop ideas from that point on, you're halfway through. I think it's a good start for international career. My answer to this question, and I'll allow me to talk a little bit about that, is if you go to the extreme, there are some migrants that don't speak a word of English and get to the US. Yes, it's a lot more difficult. You are limited to the roles that you can take. You can feel good, but it can be precarious. But taking to the extreme, we have an ambassador the summer. That's the person who asked me to put in contact with Felipe. He bought a ticket to the US and went. He's been here for years, but he says that it was challenging. It was painful. There are many ways to do that. There's no perfect answer. There's no one answer, basically, but you can make mistakes. Making mistakes you go through, not try, first of all. You must take the risk. You can not feel embarrassed of facing some uncomfortable situations. And it's kind of contradictory, but you have to get ready. You have to be prepared. You have to think what the other person is going to think about. You have to take into account the cultural differences, different sectors. Take the risk, but don't be fooled. So you must be very realistic. All challenges that you might face. If you see beforehand, if you know beforehand all challenges that you're going to face, you're not going to try. And that's a big mistake. But not planning, I think it's kind of complicated as well. Questions from the audience. Let's from Aline. In business administration, is it easier to build an international career? And is there any requirements? We're not talking specifically, well, Ariadne works in the financial sector, but in technology. But I'm going to take the advantage that Aline asked this question. Let's make it more general. And business administration, it's easier. Well, what do you need? How did you got into a certain industry? And how did you build your network? When you, Ariadne, let's start with you. When you didn't have any technical knowledge and you wanted to get into this field in Brazil, what did you do? Because imagine that you having an acquired technical competence and speaking the language that you start, it will be easier for you, right? How did you try to get into this field? And you work in Brazil, you speak very good English, but English is important. So how did you get into this? And what would be your answer to Aline? How do I get into a certain area, or how can I move from one country to the other? Well, we all start learning. So if we have a goal, we have to plan. I'm a planner. I try to go after what I think. Some people has done that. I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And from then on, we can start getting in contact, going after. You're going to receive many no's in your life, in your search. It's part of life. You learn how to interview, learn how to communicate in a more assertive and direct way. About English or technology, I think for many areas, for most of the areas, it's important, but for technology, it's crucial. All systems are basically, the language is in English. The language is built in English, so it's easier for you to understand the logic of programming. But I believe that in many areas, you're going to have the same impact. Very good. Now, let me ask. The question is from Diane Cosme, and she's asking Felipe. And I'm going to add her question. I'm going to add to her question. So, was he a scholarship holder? If yes, I mean, he spoke about Fundação Estudar. He also spoke about other networks where he participates, very competitive networks. But what I'm going to add to Diane's question is, how was this process? Ariadne just said that even not taking the the position that you were applying for, you learn. Can you talk a little bit about Fundação Estudar selection process and other process we've been through and what you've learned from them? Well, the process about scholarships, okay? Scholarship for the university, Yale University, where I went to, its approach for scholarship is to be lead blind. So they're not going to help you financially, depending on your quality as a candidate. They commit. If you're accepted to the university, they understand what your needs are and what your ability to pay. And if you don't have any ability to pay, as I didn't, they're going to provide you a scholarship. That was my case. The selection process for Fundação Estudar was the following. Was in 2014, 2015, it's pretty much like it is today. Now I'm on the other side, so I help candidates. I help to interview candidates. So first of all, it's a funnel. First, you go through an application, you talk about your background, your experiences. We do a personality test with you. And then the next step is a process like a group dynamic that you're going to interact with other candidates in a group exercise, and you're going to have an interview. I think it happens with former scholarship holders like me, and you're going to try to align you with the profile of Fundação Estudar scholarship holder, and then you're going to finally be interviewed by a board of directors. So that's the process. I've known people who went to school with me and were selected the third time. So you have to keep trying. Fundação Estudar has values that I took to my life, to my professional life and personal life. And one of them is being a resilient professional. That's crucial. It's part of being a Brazilian. You must keep trying. You must be determined. And you shouldn't be someone who can really talk, but you need to walk the walk. You need to show that your career is a product of your values. Why the world need your opinion, how to improve public sector, technology in Brazil, the financial markets, science, scientific production in Brazil. These are the things that I think I started absorbing all that when throughout my process. And I'm going to ask this next question to Ariadne. First of all, I'd like to mention something that it has to do with her previous comment, and maybe I can bear witness as a person here that a selection process that is well structured, a competitive one, even if you don't win the first, second, third, you will learn a lot from it. It's hard to don't get what you wanted. It's a difficult lesson to take. It's easier said than done. Oh, take advantage of. It hurts, but you have a lot to learn from a well-done process. Most competitively, it is the larger, the highest, the potential of the process. The learning, the largest is the learning, the highest is the learning. So not always you can do that, but try to learn from that process. Because if you manage to get something from that, you're not going to have wasted your time. So next question to Ariadne is from Flavia Valmorbida. Flavia Valmorbida. She asks, open courseware provide any sort of certification, and what is the value of a certificate in your experience? Starting with Ariadne. I'm sorry, what I couldn't hear. Open course and certificates. This sort of course, they provide any sort of certificate. And what I added is, what's the value of a certificate? High, low? It depends on the course you're taking. Because, for example, I took some open courses from Harvard, but to get the certification afterwards, you had to pay. The whole course is free, but the certification, no. But AD1 provides a free certificate. You take the course. If you take all the tests, you receive your certificate. It depends. Felipe, I'm curious. What's your opinion about certificates? And if you have any tip about open course? This model of monetizing courses started with Coursera and EDX like 10 years ago. And I'm hiring, I take that into account. I think that I don't think it makes sense for someone to pay to get a Harvard certificate, but these platforms allow you to export the course that you did to your LinkedIn. I think it's important for a professional to a person who is a professional today. They need to keep up to date. What you learn in technology, business administration at school, usually when you finish your course, you're already outdated compared to what the market is doing. So when I'm hiring, I do pay attention what are the signs that a certain candidate has in terms of his or her productivity. So if it's a free certificate in a platform and the other platform is just a profile that shows that you can something that you can add to your CV that show that you took these courses. For me, it's the same. I don't know if I would pay for that certificate today, but I don't know, depending on the area, some areas, technology, for example, in the world of certificates for cloud platform, Amazon, then our conversation with and people spent years studying that. So in general, I think it's cool. think it's cool. Question from Antonio Pedro. It has to do with recommendations of extracurricular courses in IT. What has most weight, internationally speaking? Again, it's a connection with the value of certificate, but also it's the quality of the content. So do you have any tip in terms of good content available that are valued internationally? Like, I want to see how proactive the person is. That's what Felipe said. But I think Antonio's question is a very good question in terms that what would be a good content for you to take? I mean, a course for you to take with or without certificate. CS50, for me, is my favorite online course example. I speak with people from different countries, and they offer me this information that they did the CS50. And sometimes they know what David Malin is. For me, CS50 is the best course in terms of programming. They keep up to date year after year. The level of investment that they do in that curriculum is unbelievable. They keep coming up with new materials. That's an introduction. Safety has other internet courses, more specialized in web development, for example. Those are interesting to watch. I have a website that I love. I think it's called Egghead. One of them, I think Egghead. Egghead. I think it's a very technical materials about framework. We're talking about IT. That's my recommendation. I think that's it. Ariadne, anything else? I think what else I would say is something else that I would like to say is the most important thing that you can do in terms of technology is to apply everything that I've learned, all technology that I've learned. I learned throughout a project where I needed to use that technology, always. The project is as important as the course. And I don't think you can do one without doing the other. Sorry. Can I add something else? Actually, adding to what Felipe said, a while ago, I learned some roadmap that they work with technology for different areas. And they say, what you need to know to be a good professional in that area. What I like to do is, I do follow this roadmap for studying and restudying. So I take these topics, I go after the library, because the libraries are very complete with frameworks and different languages, and I'll start studying from that point on. I work with libraries from the company who produce the technology libraries. I have a question about internships and international internships. So I think if Felipe could talk about the difference between the concept of an internship in Brazil and what's an internship abroad in the US, that are very different. Yeah, internship in Brazil is basically a work that you do part-time or maybe full-time in your last couple of years as a prerequisite so you can get your diploma. I had to do my internship in Brazil to get my technical diploma. The internship in the US is basically what you do during the summer between May and August, from one semester to the other, between semesters, right? So the experience, it depends in the US, just like different positions that you take. Like, for example, if you're doing an internship in computer science in a large company, and if you're working as an intern in a large financial institution, completely different. If I could highlight one important point, I think that it will be that usually as an intern in the US, they give you some responsibility. And I see that I feel sorry that people are kind of explored. And if you're an intern in the US, you never will take coffee to anyone. You're not there to do that. You're not going to be running errands, doing just the logistic work. They're going to give you a challenge. And I think that's the experience that everybody deserves to have as an intern. But it's been a while since I was an intern in Brazil, so I'm not sure how it has changed or progressed in Brazil. Next question, I'm gonna send it to Ariadne. It's called from Niger. The question is, what would be the first step for a Brazilian to reach the whole culture of Latin America, knowing that Brazil is a country that speaks Portuguese? So, Ariadne, your answer to this question.
Deixa eu pensar pouquinho.
Well, let me think. Let me think. It's a very good question.
Bem, a gente tem a diferença da linguagem, né?
Well, we have the language.
Uma língua próxima, uma língua prima. A gente também tem uma origem muito parecida.
We have a very similar background. Latin American countries, they have a similar story.
Tanto na parte de música, culinária,
in terms of music, cooking, all those the spices that we use. There's this integration between different cultures, but to know the culture of Latin America, it's complicated. You're never going to know the complete culture of a continent.
Inteira, né? Porque cada tem as suas especificidades, mas pesquisar sobre aquele local.
But searching about this location, region that you are interested in knowing, going after, visit the region if you can, get in contact with people, be open to the different, to whatever is different. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense to a different culture, and that's okay. That's the right way to do so. That's the best way to connect.
Okay. Eu vou juntar algumas perguntas aqui que eu, pelo menos, vejo uma coisa em comum, né? Então, a Rosângela pergunta...
Rosângela is asking...
O Anderson pergunta como...
Anderson is asking about how do I find out about international conferences, and Julia is asking about and how can I learn English fast? What do you think about this publicity and advertising market that promises learning English fast? So. How do I get organized in studying? So those are three questions that for me, they are related somehow.
Felipe, primeiro, você pode falar de entrevista, de congresso internacional, como você pesquisa isso, ou a sua...
How do you research that?
De aprender a falar inglês rapidamente
and
de forma...
this advertising that you can see people learn English fast. I mean, it's a topic that's very common among all questions. The importance of dealing or the translation to resourcefulness. That's the word. Like, how can you translate that into Portuguese? Se virar. Se virar is resourcefulness. So the idea is it's being someone who know how to research, how to learn, how to speak to people. quality. YC talks a lot about resourcefulness, and it's half of what they look for in a founder. People, how to get where they want, how to be resourceful in what they do. I think that's the most important thing, and I think it's something that I try to develop in me. Not easy.
Vejo isso em todas as pessoas que têm sucesso ao meu redor. Eu cheguei na faculdade todos aqueles anos atrás e eu percebi que
for the many few years when I got to university, many Brazilians haven't heard of Fundação Estudar. They didn't went through the same program that I did, but they managed. They read everything they had to do about the implications on the internet and get in contact with people who could help them. So that's the type of quality that I want to mimic, and that's what I want to offer the world as something for you to develop. The ability to research what you want on Google, externalize your questions, all the questions that you have, because that's going to be very useful for you and for your career. Final question, yes or no, to you. And just for you to offer your final advice. I know it's a challenge, but it's great that you could be here and talking to our audience. So that's the final question. And I'm really glad and happy that you are here today. And yes or no question from Larissa Andrade.
Does not having a LinkedIn profile hurt my chances of landing a job overseas? Essa é uma pergunta sim ou não, que é basicamente assim: não ter um perfil no LinkedIn vai me prejudicar em procurar um emprego internacionalmente? Sim ou não? E, por favor,
yes or no. And your final comments, tips. That's it. First Ariadne and then Felipe. LinkedIn today is one of the main platforms for you to connect professionally with other people. Many people are seen by other companies. They not necessarily go to the company, but the companies receive their profile through LinkedIn. And they get in contact. Basically, if you're looking for a job and you have your complete profile, maybe if you're not very active, I'm not very active in social media, but something that I did, I said, okay, let me do everything that I did. Let's add to LinkedIn, let's update it so that I can maximize my opportunities. That'll be yes. That'll be yes, 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 yes.
Não, tá ótimo. E, Felipe, sim ou não a essa pergunta e uma...
Yes or no to your question and your final comments. For me, it's a high, yes. Capital letters. Learn English. My recommendation, number one recommendation for those in technology, I think that's the most important thing that you can learn as a professional today. Not because the US is the only thing that matters. No, the whole world speaks English. So, yeah. I think that's a cliche that everybody's heard about TED Talks. Jeff Bezos talking about that. The most important thing that you can do is to be surrounded by the right people. I follow this philosophy. I mean, your network is the most important decision. I don't know if you decide, people don't decide their network, but that's the main indicator of what you're going to do or what's going to influence you or what you're going to get. So, if I were in Brazil, I would try to get at the best company I could, because I think the professionals that you grow with are the people. It's easier to leave. Let me think about a company. It's easier for you to become an international professional if you're working at Stone or BTG than if you're leaving an old company that only half of the professionals speak English. That's my tip. Perfect. Ariadne, final word. Any inspiration, any comment to our audience? I will reinforce what we talked about throughout this interview. Learning is a process, education is a process, selection is a process, reaching your goals is a process. They might be painful if you get a no, if you receive a no. It's important to be resilient and be ready, be prepared, and go after your goals, especially in technology. There is a broad range of opportunities. So if you have your goal, if you can actually dedicate your life to do that, you increase your possibility of reaching your goals. So thank you so much, you two, for being here today, for sharing your experiences. Thank you so much for the audience. Excellent questions. We've answered some of them, but not all. But the last tip is it's better to be like that. It's better to add something that people are interested in listening to, engaged. And yeah, so we are waiting for you in our next Talking Business. Thank you so much, Felipe. Thank you so much, Ariadne. And thank you to all of you in our audience. Good evening, good night, bye-bye.